mother, the Virgin Mary. This song as an individual and as a person of Sprinker.
To hold pebbles and see jewels, to raise sticks.
And poetry for me is a place to explore my thoughts and feelings I love words, so it's also a place for me to have fun and play. Sometimes poems are pretty, sometimes they are inspiring and illuminating or humorous. Sometimes they're angry, confused, or questioning. Sometimes they're focused on social issues, personal issues, and sometimes a little both. And hopefully, there can be found some kind of universal truth in the things I write. So my focus, I thought today, would be on her ancestral heritage in general and as a woman. So the first poem I have is one that was written in response to another poem. This first poem is like written in about 10 minutes in response to this short poem by Mystic Poets. My heart wears all forms. For gazelles, it's an open field. For monks, cloister. It is a temple for idols and for pilgrims. It is the Torah's tablets and the pages of the Quran. Love is the faith I follow. Whichever path love's caravan takes, that is my road and my religion. You hear that? This thing goes in and out, sorry. So, my response was this. It's kind of a little bit in a different direction, but I said, my heart bears the burden of my ancestors and yours. I long to know them all, to see them and feel them, and own the lessons as they stand in line behind me or on my shoulders, fiercely pointing the way, lest I stray from the ancient memories and all that they have learned and discerned of progress and regress. I am honored by their presence and hope to earn a fragment of grace as my heart beats rhythm in the drum of time. My lineage to become a Baha'i. My mother was 92 when she passed about 6 years ago. Her birthday's coming in the next couple of days. And this poem is about that feeling of when she passed and how it feels. She was born October 29th, 1926. I have not lost a mother before. How bewildering. Father, yes. Brother, yes. And no, so close to my heart. But my mother, the soul of my soul, my link to creation, the everlasting circle of grandmothers. Now I am an elder, a representative of all that have gone before. The weight of it all lifts me up, carry on, to remember the crying days, the diasporas, the dance, the dragon in my bones, but also the happy places, the gentle spaces, the beautiful faces of the children. May they be blessed. May they be blessed as they sweep across the earth, holding in their hands sprinkles of glittering stardust to light up the future for mankind. Like a candle, must ye glow, must ye shed your light, and even as the soft breezes of God, must ye blow across the world. For like my mama, the flame will go out, but the light is everlasting. She said, well, the title of it is Ain't I a Woman? And if you remember her, she was a suffragette and a black woman. I wrote this on International Women's Day a couple years ago. I guess I'll introduce it by this one quote. It's we haven't heard from Erica. I'm sure she'll probably use this quote, but it bears repeating. This is Abdul Baha from the Promulgation of Universal Peace. It says, therefore strive to show in the human world that women are most capable and efficient, that their hearts are more tender and susceptible than the hearts of men, that they are more philanthropic and responsive toward the needy and suffering, that they are inflexibly opposed to war and are lovers of peace. Strive that the ideal of international peace may become realized through the efforts of womankind. For man is more inclined to war than woman, and a real evidence of women's superiority will be her service and efficiency in the establishment of universal peace. Love its storm from passionate embrace, and life took form as I toiled with grace. Need I a mother, not one of sons, but of many wounds and many swoons, grandmothers before me. Ain't I a mother with hopes for my daughters and hopes for your sons that pierce my heart and make fierce my soul? Ain't I a mother, a woman among men, unwilling to send, to forcefully defend your sons and my daughters in war? What war? Ain't I a mother, a sojourner of truth, peacemaker by nature, spokeswoman of suffering and service to humankind? Ain't I a mother, tender of heart, forceful of will, tender of souls, and patient until the time we all hold the whole world in our hands, and with faith take a stand, nation to nation, man to man, woman to woman, child to child, for one family of birth, and peace on Mother Earth. The new masculine, the one not yet equipped to be holy, holy. Let your waterfall eyes be compassionate. You remember the feeling of no footing on loose stones. Let the stones be a riverbed as the forces of nature take charge, unveiling the universal drive towards the true union of souls. Let the wandering eye, the reclusive heart, the exasperated sigh, the avoidant mind, be symptoms of awareness. Let these rising energies that have lost their way become the empowerment to not accept the path of least resistance. After all, you have been created with rivers of strength to bear the burden and then rebound in childbirth. And Adam had only to give up one rib. The real task of becoming a woman is the bit about being beheld, is finally finding the place to be held, to be honored, educated, and to hold positions of power, to be received and perceived as an equal consort and contributor. The real task of becoming a woman is a bit about enshrining the divine mission, awakening and healing and leading with glances of light that pierce the veils of obstruction and read the future with gladness. The real task of becoming is the bit about humans of diverse kinds being enveloped in each other's loving and compassionate embrace. To be heard, heeded, held, and heeded. Wise woman, oh woman, nothing can stop me now. Picture this, he that don't have how. It's in the plan, so let's begin. Have the mustard, do begin. You know you want it, and I do too. Haven't guy's hard, but it's we can do. Justice, equity, equality, renew. Be happy, be a hero. Be a super cool dude, like all of those that are here today. It takes two of us to fly this plane. Two of us do not disdain. The work may be ugly and not what you prefer, but hark, that herald angel, listen to her. The veils are rent. The Lord has grace. He heard from the tent. Just look at that face. Many traces of beauty in each of our souls. It's in the teamwork that we reach our goal.
They said, oh, please send us a bio. And I said, for what? We're women. Let's do this in a way that doesn't require a list of credentials in order for you to want to I might have to say. Right? So you notice there's no bio. And thank you, Pesi, for keeping your introduction short. And not, because that's not really, that's a sort of an ego thing. It's an ego thing maybe for me, not so much for me at my age, but it might be an ego thing for you if you read a long list of 77 years of accomplishments, right? And then you probably do a little comparison thing, and you rank yourself somewhere. So why would we do that? We wouldn't. So that's just one little example. So first of all, I want to say men do need to be men. So there's two of us. There's the men and the women, and we each have our strengths. And together, those strengths turn into something else. This new marriage is now just a little over a year old. We've known each other for 40 years and got married last July. After 9 days, when we realized this was going to be what it could be. And one of the things I'm learning from this amazing relationship is a 40-year-long friendship and a year and plus a few months marriage. And marriage is different than, marriage is built on friendship, but of course the intimacy at all the levels you can experience only with somebody that you're married to. And what I'm learning, married to a man who I teasingly say is a man who doesn't have a male ego. He's a strong man, but I don't have to dance around. And most women in the room know what I'm talking about. Taking care of that ego, because he doesn't have one. And I was like, how did you do that? So part of the role of women in today's world is to raise sons and to encourage husbands and brothers and the men in their world to relax a little bit with that, not to criticize them, because we can't do that, but just help them see that that thing that they hold on to, that is the way in which they define themselves. Compassion, empathy. Those are qualities of women. We are called upon in the Baha'i writings to rise to a higher level of humility, of purity, and spirituality. not in competition with men, but the strength of women is in those qualities. So that's why I say we don't want to become men. Today's world, where equality is now a given, we're still trying to figure out what that is. Because equality between women and men is not that women will do all the things that men do, get paid the same amount of money as men do. I mean, we want equity, I'm not saying that, but that's not the point. Because actually, every human has certain capacities. And if we're not done, we visited the Coalition on Women, which you can download from the International website, the library there. And one of the things that really struck me, across the government, as I can see, is that women should not be in a position where they have to choose between their responsibility as the first educator of the child and the workplace. But right now, I will tell you from my own life. When I married, when I was 25, my husband and I agreed that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. Now, I have a college degree. I'm a competent, capable woman. And this was in the early 70s, so I grew up in the 60s, where women, this was when women really put down the next flag of women's lib, right? And so I not only had to make that decision, but also face all the women who looked at me and said, you're not using your capacity, you're not using your talent, why aren't you in a career? And I felt that my best service was to raise the kids, create a home environment, serve the faith, and, I never really felt like I wanted to use my other talents and neglect that. Now, other women have managed to balance that. I don't know how they did it, but other women have managed to balance it. But there was something that I saw in the writings that says we can't make women choose. And I see a lot of women having to make the choice. So here it is. The duty of women in being the first educators of mankind is clearly set forth in the writings. This is on behalf of the House of Justice. It is for every woman, if and when she becomes a mother, to determine how best she can discharge, on the one hand, her chief responsibility as a mother, and on the other, to the extent possible, to participate in other aspects of the activities of the society in which she forms a part. There's a letter from the House of Justice, there is one message, where there's like 6 or 7 paragraphs about children. Children are the most precious resource in the community, the most precious gift to the community. And in one of those paragraphs, the House of Justice talks about the home environment, and also about how when both parents have chosen material success, and so they're both engaged full time in bringing in the resources to have that level of material success, that it can result in neglecting of the children. And you should read this reference. I'll give it to you the second time I'm up here. But what I realized when I read that was this misunderstanding of the equality of women and men, and the materialism here in the West, sucking them in, that people were choosing to have the 2-car garage and the whatever and the whatever and the whatever, as that is what we have to have. And so that takes 2 salaries. Well, then who's raising the kids? Who are the first educators of the kids? And when I thought about that, I was like, I don't want to leave the spiritual education of my children to a daycare provider. Those first 5 years, Abdu'l-Baha says, that is what sets character and spiritual development in place. And so I could not give that up. And it meant then that we lived on one salary. So way back before it was fashionable to shop in thrift stores, when they really weren't all that fun to shop in terms of, because everything was kind of a jumble, I was shopping in thrift stores, so I could live on one salary. and I was at home. And then as my kids got into school, we had a travel teaching habit that needed extra funds. And so I would work in the schools, but in the same, I chose my jobs not by their prestige or their amount of money, or whether I was actually using my college degree to the nth degree to leverage to get more money for the family, but rather had to be at the same schedule as my kids, had to be the highest paying job that wasn't a teaching job because I didn't want to bring any work home with me. I wanted to go to work, serve, come home, serve the family. And so I worked in support jobs. I was an assistant, I was a campus monitor, and I loved it because I watched those poor teachers, and thank God for the teachers. I'm not telling anybody that they've made a mistake in their life. I'm just trying to cast a little bit of another kind of a glow on how it is that we will evolve into a world where true equality allows for women to carry out this first responsibility, this chief responsibility as a mother. Because we have to figure that out. We know because we see the effect on many children. If it's not an extended family, if you don't have grandparents and others who are there spiritually supporting the children, you see that it's very hard for the parents giving their tired hours at the end of the day and trying to establish that when all day long someone else is inputting into their character and inputting into how they view the world. That's just where we are right now. And there are, I know more and more that are figuring that out. More and more women are figuring that out. Society doesn't yet fully embrace it. Society hasn't yet figured out how we can have women be able to play that role with children and still give their gifts. Still be a doctor, still be a chief, an educator, still be all those other things. There's bound to be a way to solve that. And not put the women in the position of having to choose between their chief responsibility and something else. There's so many quotes. I'm not going to read them to you, but I hope you all have revisited the compilation on women. You can download the PDF, but this was put together years ago by the House of Justice, actually by the Research Department for the House of Justice, and it has all the things, all the principles that apply to the concepts of the equality of women and men. And I think all women and men should revisit this at least every few years. It's not long. Just go through and reread it. Now, I have mine in a bound copy. You can download the PDF. It's not long, but there's the principles. You see the same concepts, and they've divided it into several sections, which answer all the questions we have. Like, what is the Baha'i concept of equality? And in there, you find the statements that say men and women are not the same, but they are equal in the sight of God, because the soul has no gender. In the sight of God, there is no difference. There's no better or worse. And then it talks about the different strengths that you bring. And then the role of education in the development of women. Why it's so important for the first educator to be well educated, spiritually and materially. Even if she, like me, decided to use her degree to provide that education for the children, it's necessary that women all over the world be well educated. And as you know, the hula says, if a family can only afford to educate one of their two children, if one of them is a girl and one of them is a boy, we would choose to educate the girl because she's the first educator. She has that responsibility, and society has to take a responsibility of making sure that she gets educated. And that means the household, the families, the parents who are seeing to the education of their children have that in their thinking, that this is the lens through which we look. Not that he's the man and has to provide for the next generation and he gets the education. There's nothing wrong with men being educated. They need to be educated. But if we have to make a choice, as Baha'u'llah says, only if you have to make a choice, we have to choose the woman. We have to choose the next generation of the parent. And then the application of the principle of equality to family life. That section is really interesting. Really interesting, because it talks about how the family has to organize itself, the role that women play in that organization, the requirement for love and unity with the couple, the requirement for true consultation. And you know, consultation requires spiritual qualities that have to be developed. It also requires a level of equity, that the man should not dominate the woman, but some of the quotes start out with, the woman should not dominate the man. And in fact, Abu Baha'i makes a comment about the American society that he observed, where the women over-dominate the men. That was his observation. They were too domineering. So you can't have that in her. If a woman if the way she's asserting her equality is to dominate, it's just the pendulum swinging a little too far to the masculine side. The writings say that the golden age, this age we're moving towards, is an age where the feminine qualities will be equally present in the world, where men will be able to take on some of those feminine qualities, where women can take on some of those masculine qualities, not women becoming men, certainly not men becoming women, but the blend of those, the best from each, we can be carrying out, we can be exhibiting in the way we work in the world. You know, I was so fortunate. I was raised by a man, my dad, who really didn't, he had 2 daughters and then later in life had a son. But he never distinguished between us. He never treated me differently than anyone else. And I only realized in my 30s, as I started to get to know other strong women, and as you probably, if you know me, you know I'm a pretty strong woman. I'm not domineering, but I am pretty strong. I'm confident. And I'm confident because my father raised me that way. Because he didn't talk down to me. He respected me as I grew. He treated me with an immense amount of love and respect, and he expected that I could do anything. So I grew up thinking I could do anything, not aspiring to become an astronaut or something. I might have if I was a different person, but it never occurred to me that there were limitations. And then, as I began to associate with more and more people, even within the Baha'i community, I found that men found that challenging. That I would engage fully in a conversation, not deferring or standing back, or the men who were used to being kind of the voice in a group. When I strode in with my voice, they were a little put off by it, and I was surprised because my dad was never put off by my having a voice in anything. So I'm trying to show that actually, we have to have both the men and the women. They have to come along together in this. We women have to do what we have to do, and we have to help our sons, brothers, even our fathers, our husbands, help draw out the qualities where they don't feel challenged or in some way ill at ease when women are fully bloomed in their presence. And I had many men try to push me down. I wasn't having any of it, but for many women who are raised by domineering fathers, I've discovered, they will, even some of my best friends, who were such strong women, when they were in the presence of men, they behaved differently. And I was shocked until yes. And who's going to raise the mother? The mother raises both of them, raises the next generation of mothers and fathers. If we women don't have that straight in our heads, we will, without realizing it, kowtow to the domineering, teach our girls to be self-effacing and to back down, to only let their gifts shine when they're not going to be a challenge to the men. We don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want to clash. It's not like I don't want to stride in and say to these men, you guys, you have to learn how to respect women. That's not going to work. First of all, they don't think they're being disrespectful because this is how they were raised. This is how they were the little princes in their families. They were raised like that. So how could they know any different? It's not like they're doing it on purpose. It's also not like my really strong women friends were doing it on purpose when they would kind of shrink down in the presence of men. They weren't doing that on purpose. It wasn't until we began to talk about it they even realized that we're doing it. So we're not laying blame here. We're rather diagnosing. We have our finger on the pulse and we're diagnosing. So then you put a man raised by a mother and a father, a woman raised by a mother and a father, God willing, or some influence in their lives, a masculine influence and a feminine influence of some kind, generally, not always. Sometimes it's just the feminine. And we women who are raising children single-handedly, how are we aware? We're probably a single parent who's also working, trying to take care of our kids in our tired hours. How are we raising those sons? How are we raising those daughters? You see why that chief responsibility is quite a big decision to make for how we're going to spend those motherhood years. And every one of you has made whatever choices you made, and they were the right ones. Nothing wrong with any of them. Society has to help us along with this. The family has to help us along with this. It's not yet recognized that motherhood, and especially the first educator role, is the most important and the chief responsibility of women. And many women want to push that aside. Now, it's clear in the writings that this is not carved in stone, this gender role. There are couples where actually he's much better for that, and she's much better for the weight journey. And the House of Justice has said that's fine. That this is actually, in the end, the major responsibility has to be tended to. So I know a couple of couples where it's true, he really is much better suited to be the first educator, other than he can't breastfeed. But he's much better suited, temperamentally and otherwise, and she's much better suited to be the wager. And so what we want to do is make sure that that role is carried out. And in most cases, in 99% of the cases, it's probably going to be the women. So society has to adjust to that. So my experience, choosing not to be a career woman, oh my goodness, the women were the ones who gave me a lot of guff about it. They felt like I was not advancing the rights of women and the responsibility of women and the equality of women if I was a stay-at-home mom. Because that was what their mothers had done, and we were trying to get rid of that. Well, we weren't trying to get rid of that, but that's what you cannot imagine how many women were upset with me in the 70s and 80s, especially as I began to be well known in the Baha'i community because of various roles of service. And they were really disappointed that I wasn't a career woman because it didn't validate them. And I just, I didn't hang my head, but I also didn't try to defend myself because each one of us make our decisions based on the writings. That's what has to drive us, is what the writings tell us. And then we have to be courageous. Well, and again, I'm not holding myself up as an example. I'm just saying each one of us has to figure out what this looks like. And for me, it was not an easy road for me to not have a career and not to live up to my potential in the Baha'i community as well as anyplace else. Because I grew up when people were burning their bras and we were out there militantly, we meaning the culture, was out there militantly stomping around about women's rights. And I mean, we have to go through those phases. We women in the Baha'i community don't need to participate in that necessarily. But the plan of God is, it has to happen. Others will do that. That's part of carrying out the work. That's not our job. When you enter into that, Abdu'l-Baha, quote unquote, Abdu'l-Baha says, remember when Adam and the others were once dwelt together in Eden? No sooner, however, did a quarrel break out between Adam and Satan than they were one and all banished from the garden. And this was meant as a warning to the human race. The conflict and disputes are categorically forbidden. And that and quarreling, even with Satan himself, is forbidden. And then he goes on to say it again, and let me pull it up so I can give you the actual quote. This was meant as a warning to the human race, a means of telling humankind that this sentence, even with the devil, is the way to bitter loss. This is why in our illumined age, God teaches that conflicts and disputes are not allowable, not even with Satan himself. So, I have this one pretty well memorized because I had to go back and look at it so often for myself. Because oftentimes what we try to dignify a family quarrel under the title of family consultation. And when we do that, of course, it's not consultation, and it's a sneaky way of having a quarrel. But it's the way to bitter loss either way. And in that quarrel, each of you is probably seeing the other person as taking himself, because he doesn't agree with you, but she doesn't agree with you. Yeah. So when you have actual equality, it's easier then to actually have consultation. When both people can express their views freely and frankly in an atmosphere of love. Love implies respect. It implies a lot of things that women say they need. A lot of things we heard in those poems. That is what women need. It's kind of all tied up in that word love, when it's really love. So we don't have to say, we can list them out, and it's good if we do in a poem or on our wall or however we want to do it. But in reality, when there's love, then there is respect. When there's love, there is the willingness to listen and not be afraid of what's coming, or not be clinging to your own opinion. So in order for us to have women and men play their role together in the family, they have to have equality between them. That has to be present. It doesn't have to be the question, it has to be the reality. Otherwise, how can you really consult? If she can't speak freely, or if he can't speak freely, I'm thinking back to Abdu'l-Baha saying the women in America dominate their men. If he can't speak freely, then we aren't going to have good consultation. One of the wonderful things about being married to Doug is we're both experiencing being able to speak freely. To say absolutely what's on our minds. We don't have to say it in anger or in criticism or in anything else, because we can just be. And we are experiencing it at a level neither of us have experienced before in this kind of a close relationship, because we can just be ourselves. And I'm hoping that Doug will join me in my second presentation when he gets here with our car, which is no longer going to be limping. Anyway, to have that experience helps me understand the full equality, because actually Doug sees me fully on as who I am. It's not a matter of a question of equality. It's a matter of two human beings who love God and love each other, and are grateful every day for the opportunity to be in that loving relationship, supported by each other. And I found that the things that so they got to the zoo, and of course it was an old-style zoo, not the kind that we have now with wonderful environments, but just basically cages. And he started to walk towards the exhibits, and he waved the friends away. He wanted to go alone. So they stood and watched as he walked in front of these basically cages, and each display, they were bringing the babies out to show Abdu'l-Baha. And then he would move to the next, and if there were babies, they'd bring them out. And so it's just Abdu'l-Baha and the animals. He walked down the whole exhibit. When he got to the end, the last one was the giraffes. And they came up and arched their necks over the fence, and then as he started to walk away, they arched their necks towards him as if they could come with. So he had that experience, and then they all gathered in the park. And there's a picture, you can see this picture of Abdu'l-Baha. he's sitting on a bench, and the friends are all gathered around him. The women are sitting in probably on the grass with their skirts spread around. And of course, everybody's dressed in their best. And so he had a conversation with them. And part of that conversation was, he said, "You may have noticed that I haven't mentioned your faults to you." And then he said, "It isn't because I haven't seen them. It's because I've chosen to overlook them." And then he said, so sweetly, "I hope you can do the same for each other." So let's talk about avoiding fault finding as a quality of womanhood, because we have to reverse this trend. You know, I know what it's like out there in the world. When women get together, they're known for gossiping. But now it's become endemic. You walk into your workplace and people say, "You won't believe what so-and-so blah, 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 blah did." And then other people say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you had to go through that." And the next thing you know, it's turned into a whole thing, right? So it all started with a fault. So conversations start with fault. They start with so-and-so cut me off, and whatever it is. You know, the opening line in many of the conversations out there in the wider world starts with fault finding and criticism. And then it turns into offense taking. I was offended by that, whatever it was, you know, and then people say, "Oh, I don't blame you, I would be too. In fact, I think you're taking it really well, considering what they did, blah, blah, blah." So, fault finding is the most hateful characteristic of man. Criticism and backbiting are basically two sides of the same coin. It's all about the fault, because who else? I tell you to your face about your fault, or I tell somebody behind your back about your fault. Either way, it is the destroyer of unity. But we don't live in a culture that models that for us right now. So fault finding is often the most used parenting tool. Because parents, and this is without desire to make sure their children are raised well and grow up to be good people, look for their faults and tell them about them in the misguided hope that will then help them correct their wrong way. But actually, what that does is just erode their self-esteem. If you are a woman who struggles with self-esteem, I'm guessing that you experienced a lot of criticism. People told you you weren't that priority. So to raise our self-esteem, we just have to get rid of the fault finding in our heads about ourselves. Because God created us perfectly imperfect. Right? We know that there's one creator who's perfect, and billions of creation who are by creators designed imperfect. This is the design of God, and He's happy with it. He's not surprised that you're not perfect. He made you that way. Not you. You didn't make yourself that way. He made you that way. And He's okay with it. So if you think back, those of you who have been parents, if you think back to when your children were little, and maybe they were just taking those first stumbling steps. Remember how excited everybody gets when the baby starts to walk? They can't wait. They see him pull themselves up, and then they walk around and they holding on to stuff, and then they take that first awkward step, and they don't usually get very far before they fall in. I've never seen a parent say, "Stupid kid, how come you're falling down? Why aren't you up there walking?" Instead, everybody's like, well, he's actually not walking, he's falling down. But you know what I mean. He was walking, and he will walk, and we know he's going to walk, and we're really excited about it. Why aren't we not worried about all the other stuff? Because all the falling down that kids do and adults do is just the baby steps into the next developmental thing they're going to do, right? So we don't. The reason I mentioned this about walking is you and I all have the skill to overlook falling down, which is the fall. You can employ that same skill you have. You don't even have to develop it. You got it. Now I'll just use it in another scenario. Just use it in other scenarios. Because fault finding is the most hateful characteristic of any human being. And God will judge us for that, not whether or not we had gender equity in all things. So for women, if we are going to be the spiritual heartbeat, and that's really one of the roles we're asked to play. The other is to be teachers of faith. Bring that moral courage, along with a deep study of writing, and teach. Abdu'l-Baha wrote so often to the women in the West, particularly in America, praising them for their teaching, for their courage, for their knowledge, for their understanding, for their application of the writing, and for their teaching. And said that this was a strong suit for the women, and called them into that service. Now, that doesn't mean men can't teach, of course they can. But particularly, that first educator, he has another spiritual responsibility to be the first educator of all of humanity. To share the teachings of Baha'u'llah, to share the Word of God for today with all of us around. Because currently, at least, how we operate is, women are the connectors, right? Men are learning finally how to do that. But for many men, they go to work, they have a certain level of connection with the people that they work with, but they don't have that real connection yet. I mean, there are, of course, I'm over generalizing, and I apologize for that. But it's not part, I hear men saying, it's not part of male culture to really have that emotional connectedness. That women, we crave it, we seek it, we've used it for centuries and millennia to console ourselves about our difficulties. We reach out to each other and connect. So we know how to connect with hearts. And we have to use that connecting ability to teach the cause. So there's enough in this compilation on women. There's a whole section on women teaching the cause and how important it is for us to do that. But it's based on a few things. We have to be spiritually educated. We don't have to be just knowledge educated. We actually have to read and study the writings. We need to be able, there's language like educated and deep thinkers. That wasn't what women were thought about. And in the East, they were really still struggling when Abdu'l-Baha saw the glimmers of it here in the West. And he really encouraged people like Martha Root and Lloyd Getzinger to bring out that quality in themselves. And if you read there's a biography about Lloyd Getzinger, she did not consider herself capable of any of that. And he called her to it and pulled it out of her, really, that she should become an eloquent speaker and teacher. So he was calling us to actually let our gifts shine through, but they have to be based on the writings. We can't just go and have stuff made up off the top of our heads, because that's not going to attract people. The Word of God is what attracts people. So women need to be well educated in the writing as well as in their chosen field. One, women are not going to become men. And that's the summary statement. You can talk all day about what that was like. Because we have still been using the masculine measurements to measure our own success. So you could, each one of us, who are women and the men in our lives, you could look at how that has affected you, how that's going to affect your grandchildren or your children, how that affects society around you, and then take the next step in removing that from your family, removing that from your circle. Because we don't want that to be, and it's all unconscious. It's just how we've been raised, it's how society around us works. And I'm so grateful that Martha and Laura were willing to allow me to not have you publish my biography or whatever. And to let us just have this experience. Because we have to consciously make decisions or we're not going to buy in. And we all you women does not mean women become men. That doesn't mean they can't do almost everything that men can do. Men can't do something that women do. Men can't do many things that women do.
This quote. It's a quote that comes from early class. I found, I sort of memorized it a got lost, but parts of it keep coming back. So it says, if any differences arise amongst you, behold me standing before your face, and overlook the faults of one another for my name's sake, as a token of your love for my manifest resplendence.
Or whatever, right? I think it's a really good question because that's more and more people are making that choice, including my two daughters, by the way. And so, first of all, I would say that first educator responsibility rests on the shoulders of mothers. So if we're not bringing children into the world, we don't have that responsibility. However, we all have the responsibility of educating mankind and humankind. And women have particular gifts that have been highlighted that and a responsibility to do that. So, there's some people say, I'm not good with kids. Well, I wasn't good with kids either. We have to learn how to become good with kids. And that way we have both 3 in the Ruby Institute courses, which give us the basics about how to handle ourselves with children. If we're not going to be the educator of children, maybe we're going to be able to do which is because that age group, and again, lots of people think they're not good with that, and I think it's just because of their egos. Junior youth are the best, as long as you're not trying to treat them like adults, and as long as you are not don't think you know more than they do. Because they're, yeah, he didn't give an explanation. And I've heard a lot of lies, all kinds of explanations, and anything you can come up with, somebody else is going to be able to shoot down. So please don't even try. There's no point. Charlie Benny said this is an article of faith, and so you have to just realize it. But I will make some personal comments. I have voted 3 times for the House of Justice, and I served on the chief pillar of the administrative order for the House of Justice, the National Circuit of the Baha'i Perspective in the United States for 15 years. So I don't have the experience of serving on the House of Justice, but I have friends who have served on the House of Justice. So I'm a little more aware than maybe some of you who may not have ever been able to have that opportunity, just what it entails to serve in the House of Justice. I have this much insight. But I've also watched my friends go in, and 5 years later, your hair is gray. 3 years later, your hair is gray. And they bear this with great aplomb. You never hear them complaining, and I don't think they feel complaining. It's a huge burden. And having served on the key pillar of the Universal House of Justice for 15 years, I think, personally, is a gift for the women. Honestly. We don't aspire to climb a corporate ladder. None of us should be aspiring to any form of service. And the fact that I have served on a local assembly and the regional council and the national assembly and go to the House of Justice, that's not a corporate ladder climbing thing. It's service. It's all service leadership, right? It's service. But I think it was a gift. The House of Justice has access to all the women's voices it needs. Right next door is the International Teaching Center on which many women serve. It can ask and invite any group of women from anywhere in the world to consult with them on anything. So it isn't that they don't have access to insights from the women. So I don't know. It's as clear as the new days underneath it, because of my experience. And most of you don't have that experience, so you wouldn't necessarily lose it. I heard another woman say, it doesn't bother me that I can't serve on the House of Justice, and it doesn't bother me that I can't have babies. And frankly, I'd rather have babies. So, I mean, really, we're all going to have it. But friends, also remember, only 9 people on the entire planet serve on the Universal House of Justice. Women serve in every other role by the millions. So, even if women could serve on the Universal House of Justice, none of us would be doing it. So why does it matter to us? Right? It doesn't. I mean, practically, it makes no difference. You just need to serve where you are. Yeah. With distinction. And by the distinction, I'm not going to question the right, not what you need to. That is what you think of me makes no difference at all. I feel about all of him. What he thinks of me is what matters.
But could you touch on the role of women in the future? I guess kind of like to give hope because I feel like there's so many duties that right now in today's world is not possible.
Yeah. Her question is, could we touch on the role of women in the future? Because right now it feels hard.
Yeah, and I guess in also touching like in what specifically, I guess, in what way like family, community, society would be supporting women in a different way to where women could actually be fulfilled.
Free to actually make good choices without having to defend themselves. Yeah. Okay, well, in my view, my new reflections being very tough. Now, I had no idea I was going to have any of these things, but he and I both feel like we're losing in the world in our marriage. So I can tell you a little bit what's happening. Because I think this is, as we grow and develop in the Baha'i community, and so each one of us does the personal transformation that's required. We will get to this place. And I'm sure we're not yet at the point that Abu Baha was at. I don't mean to be saying that at all, but I have not experienced this before to this level. And first of all, love permeates everything. Everything. It's tangible. All day long, all night long. And it's all the time. But with that, there is no fear of criticism. Which is the big thing. How do you actually make these choices without people commenting about it? That's the hard thing. Any of you who get into social media right now, there's a barrage of commentary about everything, and mostly spiritual commentary. Sometimes it's you go girl, but it's mostly tearing down everybody and everything all day long. What you get is a barrage of criticism. Well, I live in this little bubble, where there's none of that. And we actually don't engage with much of the social media and other stuff because it's not healthy, and we don't feel the need for it. We're not disdainful of it. You know, I have lots of WhatsApp groups that I'm on. But they're all behind WhatsApp groups. And they're all...
Alas, it was to none but me, and all I've done for want of wit, through memory now I can't recall. So bill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. Oh, the comrades that ever I had are sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts that e'er I had would wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and I'll softly call. Good night and joy be with you all. Good night and joy be with you
and remind us that a foundational piece for world peace
is real equality for women and men. But that means the women also have to behave like women. Because when we take on the aggressive characteristics that are characteristic of a masculine age, then we might be willing to vote to be at war with others. And I have seen warlike attitudes sometimes in women, when they get, especially when they get petty. And then they start to, they'll undermine and they'll attack other women even, right? So it's not that women are, we have to be trained and educated and spiritualized so that we actually do bring our gifts and not what we've learned from an age that, and frankly, I don't think the men like this age any better than the women do. They just don't admit it to maybe anyone except their wives. Because who would want to be in this kind of adversarial, 3D, violent world? I don't think, you know, I think many of the men that are involved with it don't feel like they're close. And it's the same thing that I observed with the adolescent boys in middle school, when I would see, as my girls were beginning to develop friendships, and I would see the way these boys egged each other on to do horrible things. They bullied each other into being horrible beings to prove their manhood in some way. So if that's how, that's what a boy experiences in that very crucial time of adolescence, early adolescence, then it becomes settled in. So my dear Doug, today we were visited by Denali, who's a dear friend of mine. I've known her since before she was born. She came by early in the morning, 7 o'clock, because there's a regional institutional meeting happening right now in not too far from where I live. And at one point, Doug was speaking about, she was asking a question about something, and he was speaking about being able to actually speak from the writings and just share insights, and you know, one of the things he admires about me, and he got completely choked up. And he actually got up and stepped away to about 5 feet from the table where we were sitting to regain his composure. He doesn't mind being choked up in front of me, but he was surprised that he might be choked up in front of somebody else, because that's how he always choked before we got married. And between us, he gets choked up all the time by lovely things, right? He's just moved. He's moved by writings, he's moved by his love, he's moved by all kinds of things, by the gratitude of the things. So my dear, beautiful husband doesn't mind the tears, shedding the tears. But he wasn't raised that way. He's had to work to get there. And now I think as a man, he would say, why did I feel like it wasn't okay to cry? You know, I don't want to speak for him, but he's not going to get here though right after the point we're leaving. It says, noting that you and your husband have consulted about your family problems with your spiritual assembly, but did not receive any advice, and also discussed your situation with a family counselor without success. The House of Justice feels it most essential for your husband and you to understand that marriage can be a source of well-being, conveying a sense of security and spiritual happiness. So I often don't hear people telling couples that are in trouble that it's most essential for you to understand that marriage can be a source of well-being and convey a sense of security and spiritual happiness. So I really am admiring the House of Justice for starting on that foot. We just have to remind ourselves the purpose of marriage actually is well-being. And then they go on to say, however, it is not something that just happens. I'm going to say that again. However, it is not something that just happens. For marriage to become a haven of contentment, it requires the cooperation of the married partners themselves and the assistance of their families. So, all of, as we are moving into this golden age, it's all about our own transformations so that we be our best selves, our spiritual, loving, overlooking faults, not contending with each other, not taking offense to somebody's fault, mostly to our fault. And then marriage can work no matter what. But if you're not there, if you're focused on the faults, the House of Justice reminded us not too long ago that if you look at someone on the basis of their faults, then being a friend to them is a formidable task. Right? So if in a marriage or a family, or any constellation of people that are close to each other, if they're looking at each other on the basis of their faults, it's really hard to love them. Because the faults are the absences of the goods. It's like looking at the darkness. Why would we do that? But we've been trained. Society spent a lot of time training us to do that. So we come by it honestly. So don't criticize yourself for it. But if it takes you the rest of your life, it's worthwhile to get rid of it. However long it takes. So one of the things I was telling somebody at the break about Doug and I, how we had this thunderbolt, got married in 9 days. And one of the things that we were experiencing early on is both of us have been working on the same spiritual qualities for the last 40 years. He was my assistant when I was in the board, remember? And so I've known him since my kids were little. I was in my early 30s, I think, when we met. Late 20s. Anyway, and some of the insights that I had, you can hear me practically anytime I give a talk, is going to be related to these themes, just applied in different ways. Are things that I put together for strengthening unity in the Baha'i community, and I had 60 assistants at the time, those 3 years that I was a board member, and I fielded them all and said, go and take everybody through this material. And guess what it's about? Not criticizing, not arguing, not taking offense, a few basic things like that. And instead, praising, overlooking faults, and consulting instead of arguing. So Doug was my assistant, so he went through that training with me, and he did it, and it was with me. He often was also my driver for long distances because he lives near me and he liked to drive. So, and he had a plane, and so at that time he had a business, and my force base were his same business territory. So he would time his business trips to Montana for my Baha'i trips to Montana. So the Baha'is in Montana actually got to see their board member way more because Doug would fly me and go do his business and come back and go through the same material that I was doing with him. So he actually absorbed it, and he's been working on it all week. So we both did the work for all these decades in our respective lives. And then when we married each other, we're tasting the fruit of it. And Doug was the one to say, I've been working on this for 40 years, ever since we first went through that stuff, trying to put it into practice. And I said, I've never had the experience of being somebody else. We've done these same things. And now here you are. Peace. And leading up to that, I want to share another extract from, this is written on behalf of the Guardian. And Abdu'l-Baha says, the Guardian says, what Abdu'l-Baha meant about the women arising for peace is that this is a matter which vitally affects women. And when they form a conscious and overwhelming mass of public opinion against war, there can be no war. But Baha'i women are already organized through being members of the faith and the administrative order. So I know that sometimes we're tempted to go out and join or form an organization aimed specifically against war or save the environment or whatever it is. But the Guardian says the Baha'i women are already organized through being members of the faith and the administrative order. No further organization is needed. But they should, through teaching and through active moral support they give to every movement directed towards peace, seek to exert a strong influence on other women's minds in regard to this essential task. So we are exhorted to be influencers. Now, we didn't have such a thing as influencers when the Guardian was writing this, but that's essentially what it is. Baha'is are looking for ways in which we can influence God. That's what participating in the discourse of society is all about. And there's a lot of discourse in society about women, the role of women. So we can, if that's the thing that you can see yourself participating in, you should be. But you don't have to go form an organization. You don't have to join an organization even necessarily. Let me share a little bit of recent experience. In my cluster, because of that, regional councils focus on helping all of us see that we have to see everything through the lens of race. My local spiritual assembly and other local spiritual assemblies have taken the anti-black racism course, and it's really helpful to start looking at everything through the lens of race. It changes the way you do things in fundamental ways and makes it better. Anyway, every community in our cluster got interested in both the Race Amity Day and the following week is Juneteenth. So Race Amity Day is one weekend and Juneteenth is the following weekend. So we can do kind of a kickoff through Race Amity Day and then do Juneteenth. So in every community, the Baha'is got involved with Juneteenth planning. And for many of them, it was the first time they were doing a Juneteenth celebration. So, what did they find out? In most of them, they didn't have the influencing voice because there was so much disunity amongst the people on the committee that there was no way to get a word in edwards. And so the reflection afterwards was what they could do is be present at the gathering. They had a booth with face painting and other things for kids and stuff about race unity and that sort of stuff. But they actually were not able to have an influential voice because there was so much disunity. People would quit, other people would come on, and they would quit. They get mad at each other and all of that sort of stuff. So it doesn't mean that they're not going to continue, but they got realistic about it. I think they went in with pie in the sky eyes in that one community. In another community, they'd already been working together with the Equity Commission, or what they called it in their country. And there were already Baha'is well known, and so they actually helped form the group that was planning Juneteenth. And because they already had friendships established and some credibility established, that went in a very different way. So some learning is how are you going to influence people's minds? Well, first of all, sharing this message in its purest form as possible will influence those who can be influenced. And we don't try to we're not trying to change people's minds, we're just trying to help them see another way of looking at something, right? And so we have direct guidance from the Guardian but they should, through teaching and through active moral support they give to every movement directed towards peace, seek to exert a strong influence on other women's minds in regard to this essential matter. So again, because oftentimes peace movements, peace groups are aimed against war, often against certain governments and certain things that the House of Justice says we can't be involved in that. It may not have occurred to us women that we need to be influencing the minds of other women. But that's our direct assignment from the Guardian, is influence the minds of other women. So you can have women for peace, but then you can also start with a peace statement instead of the anti-war statement. Because anti-war makes somebody the enemy. Or peace is inclusive of everyone. You see what I'm saying? So we get caught up and say, well, we have to be anti-this, anti-that, anti-the next thing, because that's what our materialistic culture is calling us, educating us to be. But we're not anti. The moment you say, I'm anti, you've made somebody the enemy, and how can you have the oneness of mankind if you're an enemy to somebody? There is no enemy. Ignorance is the enemy. Ignorance is the enemy, and not a person or a thing or a group. That, I think, we definitely, all of us, will be working in the direction of peace, but not necessarily in the ways that you might see being carried out in your world. Now, how could that change? It could change by doing what we do from the very beginning in the Institute process, by developing friendships with individuals, with groups of individuals, and then gradually through ways that they themselves may not be able to acknowledge, we're going to give them comparison. But you are going to do what Abdul Baha did, which was to say, right, agree. But look at the matter in this way. So, one of the things that we learned from watching Abdul Baha is that he never countered somebody's opinion or idea. He would find a point of agreement in it. Even the most ridiculous ideas. There's a kernel. And oftentimes that kernel of truth is an aspiration, not actually what they're saying. So right now we are in such a politically divided world that it's very hard not to get sucked into one side or the other because there's a lot of fear-mongering going on. And if you buy into any of that, and you're worried about the outcome of the election or the this or the that or what if, you have to go back and think about Abdul Baha during World War I, which you can read about in Visiting Abdul Baha, Volume 2, where he describes Abdul Baha during World War I. There were blockades, there were warships in the harbor of Dhaka, and everybody was scared, especially because the Turks were coming in and stealing everything, stealing the young men into the army, and then stealing all the goods to feed the army. So people actually, there was famine there. A lot of people died. Right there in the Holy Land. A lot of people died because of the Turks as they were preparing and then fighting the war. They were. When you look at Abdul Baha, everybody who saw Abdul Baha at the time, they described him as serene and happy. He wasn't happy that people were dying, but that's something that's out of your control of his people. He was serene and content because he knew where the world was going. And just as the House of Justice has reminded us in this last Islam message, we might be, what's the language? Somebody probably has it memorized. We might be something, but we're not confused. Right? And so one of the ways we can influence people is not to be afraid. Help them see the bigger picture. Help the people around you who feel like the world is falling apart and that we're all going to die, or whatever it is they think is going to happen. Help them to see that there's two processes at work in the world. One process is the collapse of all the things that are not working. Everything that isn't working is collapsing. The economies are collapsing, the political systems are collapsing, all the stuff is collapsing. It just doesn't work. It's supposed to be that way. It's, if that crop has grown, it's yielded whatever fruit it's going to yield, and now when you go out and look at that garden, it's all dying and falling over. That's the old world order. It's all dying and falling over. We're not concerned with that. We're concerned with building up the new. You and I are sowing the seeds for the crop that's coming up in the spring. And that crop will come up fresh and green right where the old one fell over. Same thing, right? So, two processes at work. The Guardian explains to us that Baha'u'llah says these two processes are happening simultaneously and they will pick up in speed. And you can see the world is getting worse faster. So it's supposed to happen. It's okay that it's happening. And while our hearts grieve for the losses that people are suffering and all the agony that people are going through in these war-torn areas, we have to remind ourselves of a couple of things. First of all, Baha'u'llah says, I swear by my life, nothing save that which profiteth them can befall my loved ones. And if you think that not everybody is the loved one, Baha'u'llah defines them in the hidden words. I love my creation, hence I created thee. That's you, everybody. Anybody who reads that, it's them. So all of creation is all humans were created, and they are all of the loved ones. So just like Abdul Baha said, strange it is that I love you and still I'm happy that you've had many sorrows. Baha'u'llah says many things can happen to people, but their souls are safe. The wars that are happening right now, the people that are dying, the maimed, the children, all the things that break our hearts, their souls are safe. Otherwise, it's not just. How could God let tyrants harm souls? The bodies are only going to live for a short time anyway. but their souls are eternal. No one can touch the soul. I swear by my life, nothing save that would profit of them give all my loved ones. And you know what Baha'u'llah says about those who are killed unjustly, before their time. They enter into that realm of the mercy of God, and they progress with the will and mercy of God. So they're, in the big picture, they're not harmed. In a moment, they're harmed. Physically, outwardly, they're harmed. But in the big picture, now that doesn't mean that we want war or that we approve of people killing each other. No, of course we don't. But what we can know is at the bottom of it all, the justice of God is that they are all welcomed into the Allah kingdom, right? And progress with the will and mercy of God. So you and I have to duke it out with ourselves to get to that place where we recognize. Oops. Hold on, you guys. What was that? Over here. I couldn't answer the phone. What I was saying was we have to get to the point where we are really firm in the fact that everybody is cradled in the loving hands of God, and that wars and all the horrible things are not outwardly they are fire and vengeance, but inwardly they are light and mercy. This is the spiritual reality. Outwardly it is fire and vengeance, but inwardly it is light and mercy. Those souls are experiencing light and mercy. And outwardly it is war. So we do not approve of war, and we won't have war someday. But right now, we just have to be okay with the fact that a just God will not allow injustice to persist through eternity. It just doesn't happen. We know that. We know that. So every Baha'i woman and man, you need to get that really strongly right there where you can speak with confidence and help others. This is a time where hope is falling. And Baha'u'llah said we have to bring hope to the hopeless. So this is a right time for us to be influencing all the other women and the men and help them see their way. This is, the message of hope from Baha'u'llah shines brightly in this horizon as it advances. And you and I can't be the ones that are just, running around tearing our hair out because the world is we can't. Go back, read Promise Day is Come, do whatever you need to do, read the Goal of the New World Order, read whatever, go back and refresh yourself about the processes. The Guardian wrote extensively about it. And you, so it's available. Set up little study groups to study if you're taking on this, or maybe you've just never read it. Really, study what the processes are right now, so that we can be confident and serene. Like Abdul Baha. He sent the Baha'is off those two farming communities, Abasia and during the time, because they were so terrible. So he sent them out of the Haifa Aga area off into the farming area. But he stayed, and anybody who saw him there never saw him worried. They never saw him worried. Although, one of the sections of the Will and Testament says he doesn't know if he's going to live until the next day. Because the head of the Ottoman Empire had sworn that if they were defeated on his way out, he would pay out. So it wasn't like, this is not make-believe, or this isn't theory. Abdul-Baha was quite aware, but he also knew whose hands he was in. So he just moved through the community, wherever he could, doing all the things he always did, give to the poor, console people, share wisdom. By the way, also meeting with the generals when they wanted to meet with him. They were talking about the war, talking about spiritual things. I mean, that's what he did. So you and I can know that it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to be like everybody else. It's okay to it's okay as the war is raging around us in all the ways that there is war raging around us. It's okay for you and I to be okay. Not okay with, it's not that we want war, but we're okay with the process. The peace-based, outside-facing, and then there's what happens when the closer. and it's okay to lose your temper because you're tired, or this or that, or whatever it is, to be self-indulgent in some way. So that part, if we take ourselves into account each day, which was respond by your question, how can you face Baha'u'llah if you have a double standard? That you're one way with the friends or with your workplace, and you're a different way with your family. So I'm sure none of you are like that, but I have observed that many homes are like that, or have been like that, where there's a standard inside the home which doesn't necessarily reflect the writing, and a standard outside the home where you put on the face of the writing. There's a letter from the House of Justice addressed to 3 individuals in the Scandinavian country in April of 2013, April 19, 2013, where the House of Justice says that these 3 individuals have written to the House of Justice saying it's not possible for Baha'i youth to be chased today in Europe. It's not possible. And they gave a long list of why, and the House of Justice in their first paragraph says, you stated this, and this. So they just repeated back what the people have said about why they thought it would be possible. And then the House says, if the Baha'i youth live a double life, it's not possible. And many Baha'i youth have their life at school, and their life when they're animating YouTube or whatever. Or their life at feast or children's class, and their life at school. So if we encourage that, where are they getting that if they live a double life? What kind of atmosphere do we create in our homes where we allow for that? Is there backbiting in our homes when there would never be backbiting in peace? Is there complaints and character assassination about our bosses or our co-workers at home because it's okay at home because you've got to get it off your chest? Well, no, it's not okay. And the House of Justice specifically remarks about that in that 2000 message where there's just all those paragraphs about children. It's not okay because they then learn to have a double life. They learn to have a life at school, and a life at home, and a life at peace. And the House of Justice says if you live a double life, it's not possible for you to obey even the simplest law. Because you'll dissimulate. You'll try to act one way when you're one place and another way in another place. There has to be coherence in your life. And who is going to be the person that has the coherence, the model of coherence in everybody's life? It's the mom. And so that part of being the Baha'i educator is also for you to strive to be coherent. Now you're not going to be perfect. As grandparents, you're not going to be perfect, but your kids are not going to be perfect. One thing that's helpful is if you don't hold yourself as the standard, but instead hold Baha'u'llah as the standard, and then everybody can be their imperfect human selves in the face of Baha'u'llah's standard. But then you can say, I'm trying to do this. I hope you can do better. Be the ever-advancing civilization. I'm working on this one. You know, it wasn't right of me because Baha'u'llah says this. It's not two professions. It's just you're learning. How do you model a little reflecting learning process if you're holding yourself up as being the adult and not letting your children see you grow? So all of this, I think, is going to be part of the future, and how women will influence. We have great influence. We don't have to necessarily be out there on a pulpit or giving talk. What we need is the coherence of our lives, to be in our homes, in our communities, where we volunteer, where we work, to be just.
Where I live, there are rainbows with life and the laughter of morning and stormy nights. Where I and flowers full of colors, and birds filled with song. I can smile when it's raining and touch the warmth of the sun. I hear children laughing in this place that I love, where I live. There are rainbows with light in the laughter.
O my Lord, my defender, my help in peril. Lowly do I entreat thee, ailing do I come to thee to be healed. Humbly do I cry out to thee with my tongue, my soul, my spirit. O God, my God, the gloom of night that shrouded every region, and all the earth is shut away behind thick clouds. The peoples of the world are sunk in the black depths of vain illusions, while their tyrants wallow in cruelty and hate. I see nothing but the glare of searing fire that blazed upward from the nethermost abyss. I hear nothing save the thunder's roar that belloweth out from thousands upon thousands of fiery weapons of assault, while every land is crying loud in its secret tongue. My riches avail me nothing, and my sovereignty hath perished. O my Lord, the lamps of guidance have gone out. The flames of passion are mounting high, and malevolence is ever gaining on the world. Malice and hate have overspread the face of the whole world, and I find no soul except thine own oppressed small band who are raising up this cry. Make haste to love. Make haste to trust. Make haste to give. The guidance come. Come ye.
Where